Gamers all around the flat universe. Today we are discussing something that some people hate, and that is, as Reddit makes it every time, the official tier list. Because most of the people that are watching this do not play water maps, do not play hybrid maps. This will be strictly for land maps. So, maps such as Gorge, Dry Arabia, Cliffside, Rocky River, High View, Lepani, stuff like that. So obviously we just had a tournament finish, and there were some civs that were picked a lot. There were some civs that were having quite a bad win rate. So with that being said, I'm going to be doing civ tier list based on land maps only, based on civ strengths and so on. And I'm assuming the season will be ending soon, so we're going to probably have a new patch, and then in July we're going to do another civ tier list. Warning, this is, in my opinion, top level gameplay on land maps, okay? If you're Gold League, this probably does not reflect your state of ladder, but it's something to maybe work towards to. Number 1 civilization we'll be talking about is going to be English. Very good. Again, we might hopefully see some changes, nerfs for English King, White Tower kind of thing, but as it is right now, 2TC King is very, very strong. You can still do like longbow pushes as well, but King is just very, very strong. It allows you to get a second TC safe while harassing your opponents, which is pretty good. Next civ we'll be talking about is going to be Delhi. I think Delhi is just, it's consistently good, like especially on land maps. Not much has changed. I think Delhi is still a great civ. It's very hard to fight it in feudal for a lot of the civs. It has some matchups that are pretty rough, but it has some matchups that are really, really good for you. So I'm gonna give Delhi a little A tier. Maybe we'll bump it down a little bit later. I'm not sure. We'll have to see, but we'll put it there for now. Next civ is going to be Rus. I mean, it's been S tier for God knows how long, and it continues to be S tier. The main reason is Kremlin. Similar to English, but while English gets King to get their second TC safely, Rus is Kremlin, which means you pretty much can't do anything about it. And then after that, they can rush castle, they can go feudal, they can do whatever they want. Their walls are really strong. Rus, very nice. Next civilization we'll be talking about is going to be, and again, this is strictly on land maps, it's going to be China, and I'm going to be putting China in B tier. Now, I don't think China is terrible, but I think playing against these top tier civs is, you don't really have any advantage. Like, I think best case for China is if the opponent goes to TC and then you go to TC. But if the opponent decides to like all in you or rush you, they will be able to shut you out of the food resources. And then you're going to be struggling for food very, very quickly. Which is why China is not really picked at high level on open maps, because if your food is like forward, you're very spawn dependent. So if your food is forward and your opponent goes aggressive, ends up denying your food, you kind of just die because, you can't transition to farms with China that early. So, yeah. Next one we'll be talking about is going to be... Now, HRE has seen a lot of popularity on land maps recently. It's been played quite a bit, and while I do agree it has a lot of good matchups, and while in the last tournament it was played quite a bit actually on land maps even, not just water maps, I think that HRE has some good matchups on land, but it would definitely not be my go-to pick. Like, having farms around Chapel is like really, really strong. You don't need to go on the outside food sources. Some matchups were very good for you, but if you want to do some kind of castle rush with HRE, again, depending on the map spawn and depending on the matchup, the opponent can put enough pressure where you can't actually get any relics. But on the other hand, there are some matchups like HRE versus Delhi, which is very, very good for HRE. HRE versus English, which is very good for HRE. So there's HRE versus China, I think, is also good for HRE. So there's some matchups where HRE has a pretty good matchup into it, but then against some of the other civs, you just kind of feel sluggish and slow. And if you cannot rush castle and you have to fight them in feudal, but they're a better feudal civ, then you're gonna struggle quite a bit. Which leads me to our next civ that's one of the, in my opinion, very good civs against H3. It is Ayyubid. So you can't really rush castle versus Ayyubid because they can do it too while putting pressure on you. Even if you do rush castle, they're still gonna have more map presence. If you fight in feudal, Ayyubid is not bad in feudal at all. So it's one of those. At the high level, I feel like it's one of the hardest civs to play against. And the reason for that is they can go castle very easily. Like they commit full feudal aggression. And then they pull workers off of wood. They go gold food and they immediately age up. And then they're back to producing units. So it's very hard to play against them, I think. And very uncomfortable playing against them as well. So very good. Next one we'll be talking about is going to be... we'll put Ottoman into C tier. I think Ottoman is probably like A tier if you manage to get to Imperial. But the problem is Ottoman feudal at the moment is very slow. If you rush castle, you're also kind of slow compared to the other civs. But if you manage to get to castle and you got your military schools up and you're pumping units, it's like very, very good. Probably up to B tier, but then if you get to Imperial, it's even better. But I think the feudal is its biggest issue, and a lot of civs will just kind of mow you down in feudal at the top level. So if they were to get some kind of help in feudal, they will probably go to A or B tier because they're very, very strong in Imperial, and military schools producing units for free is very, very strong as well. Next civ we'll be talking about is going to be Order of the Dragon. You know, when I look at this, when I look at the civ tier list, I think about like, I'm playing on Dry Arabia, which civ would I pick? And the only time, let's say I knew the matchups, like I know the matchup, and I'm like, okay, I can pick any civ. I don't see any situation where I would pick OOTD at the high level. The best civs to play against with OOTD is probably French, JD, and Mongol. Those three civs you should like clap pretty hard. Other than that, I feel like you're not even, you're just at a disadvantage in pretty much every other matchup. And the problem is Mongol, French, and JD are not really the most picked civs in at the high level. So what are you picking OOTD for? So in my opinion, not very good. Next civ we'll be talking about is going to be let's go with JD. I'm not sure if JD is B tier or C tier. The problem with JD is that it's not necessarily terrible, but you literally have one style and everyone's using just one style. And the one style is you just make knights, make archers, and then if you need spearmen, make spearmen, and just go and try to force opponent into feudal fights. Now that's great, but in some matchups that does not work simply. In some matchups the JD can be sniped really, really hard. So while I would say the strength is probably B tier, because it's so one-dimensional, like literally there's nothing else to do with JD, I would probably put it into C tier. And let's just add French onto there. Now these two civs are very similar. French is just more economic. Like yes, you can go 2TC, but if you go 2TC, I feel like it's just not as strong as some of the other civs that are going to TC. And I do think that both JD and French need help. My solution for JD and French, I would personally love if French got chivalry buffed, maybe to what it used to be, 125 gold instead of 200 gold. I would love that. And make French knight civ. French is knights, okay? French equals knights. And ready for this? JD should not have School of Cavalry. JD should have School of Infantry. And they should have Jeanne's champions buildable in that barracks. Or at least give them feudal men-at-arms. That is the best thing they could do for French and JD. Right now their playstyles overlap quite a lot. And I think French should be Knight Civ and JD should have School of Infantry. This is something I actually suggested to devs when JD got released. I said this makes no sense. why isn't she an infantry civ and French is knight civ? It would make perfect sense. And the funny thing is, as the meta developed, JD opens with knights, but JD never actually sticks with knights at the high level. Usually JD players transition to men-at-arms crossbow later on, so having School of Infantry makes even more sense for that reason. Next civilization we'll be talking about is going to be... I think Japanese is honestly better than these. It's kind of weird a bit putting it on pair with China, but land maps are very aggressive at the top level. Or Castle Rush, or very aggressive, with which Japanese can kind of do both. Some aggression to Castle Rush, or just straight up Castle Rush, and then get the relics. So I'm probably going to put them here. It's one of the better castle rushing civilizations, but in my opinion it's just not very good. Although their Imperial is absolutely insane, and the passive gold they have is crazy. Next civ we'll be talking about is going to be... We're going to put Jushi's Legacy right there. Let's put it right there. I think OTD is a tier of its own. Let me just put it that way. I think Jushi Legacy has some strong matchups, like Jushi Legacy versus Delhi. Jushi Legacy versus Ottoman is very, very one-sided for Jushi Legacy. They can spam Zuginu, but I feel like even when you rush Castle with Jushi Legacy, if you don't know, you can rush Castle with Jushi Legacy faster than any civ. I feel like the transition is so wonky and so fucking weird that you get a couple of knights, you get the bold monks, you get the relics, but then it's like, oh, you're just kind of stuck there. Your eco is still shit. You have knights, cool, and then what, right? It needs help somewhere. I personally think that it would be great if they buff Jushi Legacy's second feudal landmark, the one that spawns a free unit. It just seems really bad. Maybe what they could do, and honestly I think this might be a buff enough. I would like if Jiangnan Tower was able to produce imperial officials. That's it. We know back in the day when China was complete crap, they made imperial officials buildable from Imperial Academy, and then the civ was a lot better overnight. So I think that'd be great for Jushi Legacy as well. I don't see why not. Spawn Palace Guards instead of Spearmen. See, that's a good idea, actually. That's actually a very good idea. If you're in Castle, maybe whenever you build a barracks, it should spawn the latest tier unit. So if you're in Castle, it should spawn Palace Guards. If you are in Castle, Stable should produce a Lancer, right? If you are aging up to Imperial and you make archer ranges, maybe you should make Engineers. Maybe that's too strong, but right now that landmark sucks. Like, you know what annoys me the most? Yeah, 150 wood Lancer. Yeah, that's maybe too strong, but it should do something. Like, it should scale somehow, right? Obviously, spamming Lancers for 150 wood would be too strong, but they should do something with that. I don't know, because for me, one of the most annoying things playing Jushi Legacy and Imperial is you make like 20 stables, and then the thing is just producing 20 horsemen. And it's like, bruh, I don't want horsemen, you know? Or maybe it should give you tickets, okay? We've seen the ticket system, why not use it here? Every time you build a production building, you get one ticket. Maybe horsemen, spearmen, and Zuginu cost one ticket. Maybe Palace Guards cost 2 tickets, and then Lancers cost 3 tickets. So then, in order to produce a Lancer, you would need to spend 450 wood, right? Something should be buffed to that civilization, because yeah, or to that landmark, because right now it kind of sucks. And again, their Imperial is decent, it's pretty good, but getting there is a big issue. Next thing we'll be discussing is going to be Mongol. I think Mongol B tier. It's funny because it's like a nomad civ, but it's a very spawn dependent civ. Namely, markets. If your market spawns good, it's like, ooh, Mongol's pretty good on this map. And then if your market spawns in the middle, you go from like pretty good to literally unplayable at the high level. There are some very, very bad matchups for Mongol. Delhi is terrible matchup for Mongol. HRE is terrible matchup for Mongol. OTD is a terrible matchup for Mongol, but it also has some good matchups where they can... Rus, yeah, Rus is terrible for Mongol. So I think Mongol is like a civ that has too many terrible matchups. And then most matchups are just even or average, which is not good for you, because then it's like, oh, I'm either going to get a auto loss matchup or I'm going to get an even matchup. So, yeah. I would personally love if they buffed Deer Stones and like buffed economy on Mongol. I don't think Mongol design is necessarily bad. I think their just economy is too shit compared to the other civs. And if you ever play Mongol, you know what I mean. Like, you just don't have resources to do stuff. I don't know how else to explain it. There's just no resources. So, yeah. Next one is going to be Abbasid. I think Abbasid is a very solid civ. I don't think it has any counters, which is one of the big strengths, I think, for Abbasid, in my opinion. There's no civ that you run into, you're like, okay, I lost. Maybe English is not a great matchup, but other than that, I think Abbasid is just all-around solid civ. And that's it. There's not much else to it. I think people learn how to use military school, military wing Abbasid quite well. And similar to English, they put pressure on you while getting their second TC safely. So they kind of start with second TC. And the last two civilizations, obviously I keep the most controversial for last. And we're going to be talking about Malian. Malian, in my opinion, is potentially a B tier, but I like Malian quite a lot. Now, why is it potentially a B tier? Malian, very similar to Mongols, has a lot of bad matchups. But I think the matchups that it's like, it doesn't really have like too many neutral matchups either. I feel like it's either favored or it has bad matchups. But I think that if you know how to play Malian at the high level, and if you manage to get the cow boom going, most matchups are playable. But there are some pretty bad matchups. Delhi is a very, very, very bad matchup for Malian at the high level. I would probably call it an auto loss. If Delhi player is decent, you will get absolutely butchered. Abbasid is pretty good against Malian. Mongol is okay against Malian. Ottoman is really good against Malian. Any civ that can either tower rush or put super early pressure on them is very good. But on the upside, Malian is very good against castle rush civs, because even if you rush castle and go knights, you have donzos that can snipe knights very easily because of the throw ability. Or if you go men-at-arms, they have Musafaris. And against some of the boom civs where they go 2TC, Malian gets cow boom for free, and then you can kind of take over the map. So while Malian has some terrible matchups, overall I think it's still a great civilization. And last but not least, my favorite civilizations with the most batshit insane player base, it is Byzantine. Yeah, right. Byzantine is still S tier. What do you want me to say? Nothing's changed. Nothing's changed. Now, there's going to be a lot of people who don't really understand the game. So I will go into this in another video. But in the most recent tournament, I'll just give you a little taste. In the most recent tournament, Byzantine had, I think, second lowest win rate in the tournament out of the 16 civilizations. And there's a very, very good reason for that, which I'm going to talk about in the next video, where I'm going to be covering the tournament win rates and discussing this further. But as far as Byzantine goes on land maps, doesn't really have weaknesses, except 2-3 civs. And those 2-3 civs that I found personally, Mongol is very good against Byzantine. Malian, in my opinion, is very good against Byzantine. And English can be played a certain way that is good against Byzantine, but most of the other civs, good luck. By the way, this is in no specific order. Like S tier, like this doesn't mean that English is the best civ and then Rus is second. This is third, fourth, fifth, sixth. It's in no specific order. That is it. That is the tier list for June 2024. In the next month, we're gonna have new seasons. Hopefully, new patch, new changes, and a new tier list. If you're watching this on YouTube, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you. If you're watching on Twitch, let's keep going.